Good morning, and thanks for joining us on our Victory Over Violence digital series. I'm Ashlei King. Robert Holt had to step away this week, so I'm going to hold it down here solo. But we have a great show today. We are still tackling the topic of domestic violence. Now, we know here our goal at Fox 16 and KARK is to declare victory over violence, and in order to do that, we have to tackle all aspects of violence, including domestic violence, which often impacts, an entire family, can impact an entire family. And so our guest today has a personal experience, and I want to go ahead and bring her in right now. Our guest is Miss Brandy Daly. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Yes, glad to have you. All right, so I guess first of all, just kind of explain to people a little bit about your background. So you do have a personal, you are a survivor.
Yes, so I'm a childhood survivor of domestic violence. So for context, like as you mentioned before, entire families can be affected by domestic violence. So myself and my siblings, we were able to escape our abusive parent. We actually fled here from Texas back in 2011. And over the series of many years, many therapies, many types of interventions, and an incredible support system, we are able to kind of have some healing in our family and move forward over what happened to us.
Wow. So you said this happened several years ago, and it's taken a long time to have some of that healing. I know now you work with the Arkansas Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do with them?
Yes, so the Arkansas Coalition Against Domestic Violence was actually founded in 1981 as part of a membership organization to help represent all domestic violence shelters in the state of Arkansas. And so I first heard about them with a grant project at a different company where we focused on domestic violence and human trafficking in kind of a public health setting. And I started to connect the dots that, oh, wow, the things I'm, training on and learning about through this official professional setting actually applied to me. And so I started having a lot of really deep personal conversations with myself, my family, some professional mentors, and realized that what I was training people on, I benefited from. I had a personal experience. And so I've tried to take that and run with it and take it to this level where I can help other people across the state and hopefully across the nation realize that they're not alone, and that if you are experiencing things that make you feel unsafe at home, that there are resources for you.
Yeah, and we have some of those resources on the screen right now so people can see those the numbers to call if they ever need any help at all. This is kind of weird. Can I have you move to your right just a little bit? Your face is cutting off. There we go. Yeah. Okay. I was like, your face is cutting off. I don't want your face to be cutting off. Okay, so can you just talk a little bit about, I guess you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how did you get involved exactly with this?
Yeah, so I first started getting involved in domestic violence or victim advocacy back in 2017 with a grant project called Project Catalyst. I was with a different organization, but essentially the focus of the project was to identify public health partnerships between community health centers and domestic violence shelters, so that people who were experiencing violence at home, when they went to the doctor, that they could be identified and be connected to an advocate, or if they went to shelter and had a medical emergency like a traumatic brain injury or an assault, that they could be connected to a medical provider. And like I said before, through that experience, I was like, wow, okay, I actually am a survivor. What happened to me was domestic violence. And I was able to kind of piece together a path forward for myself and my family.
So when you were, because you said it was a childhood, so did you not, at that time when you were kind of living through this, you just didn't realize what was going on?
Correct. I think like a lot of victims, I never identified as a victim or a survivor until fairly recently, probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Because for us, it was just a way of life, right? Every day we would wake up, experience what we experienced, and we just assumed that this was how it was for every family. When we came here in 2011 after escaping our abusive parent, our legal guardian took us in, and she helped figure out the legal questions around what happened to us. But despite that, despite having to go to court and testify against my own parents, I still didn't think of myself as a victim. I still didn't want to take on that identity. And I think a lot of victims can relate to that, because when you have that forced upon you, you have to deal with this whole identity crisis that a lot of people just aren't ready for.
What was that like? You mentioned you had to testify against your parents. What was that like for you?
It was extremely challenging. I was only 15 at the time, when this whole legal question came up. And I really had to think hard about who I was, about my faith, and how I felt about my parents, what had happened to me. And it had to happen on a fairly strict timeline. We started legal proceedings, and within a year, I was in court testifying.
Wow.
And having to speak out loud to other people, my story, what happened to me, what happened to my sisters, to my brothers.
Yeah.
It was extremely challenging emotionally. And I feel for all the child witnesses out there who've had to go to court. And I applaud all the advocates out there who are there for them and providing resources so they can get through that experience.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have an advocate. So how, a lot of times I know when people are in these situations, it's difficult to escape. So how were you guys able to do that?
So that's actually a great question. Escaping is probably the most dangerous time period for a victim of domestic violence, just because you're challenging your abuser's authority. And so when we left, I actually didn't know we were leaving. That's a common experience for a lot of kids in these situations. Their parents are so focused on surviving that when they are able to escape, there's often not a whole lot of mourning or planning or a sit-down conversation. And so I was told that we were going to leave. It took, I think, 3 weeks from when I was first told that we would be moving states to when it actually happened. We left in the middle of the night. Luckily, it was over the summer, so I was already done with the school year. But I kind of had to say goodbye to my friends with no end time.
Wow.
There's a lot of unanswered questions. To this day, I still am not quite sure how we managed it. But I think that, again, is a very common experience for a lot of child victims, child survivors, because you're not told what is happening. You're just trying to get through the experience.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for anybody who is trying to make that plan to leave?
Well, first and foremost, I would say work with an advocate, either at a domestic violence program, call the national hotline that you have displayed on the screen, because safety planning is really, really important. You need to have some sort of plan in place. You know, have documents stored. If you have medications, you need to have backup plans. So if your first attempt fails, what are you going to do? How can you plan ahead for various scenarios, right? I would also say that shelter is not just a place for emergency housing. We never went to a shelter, but had I known now, had I known then what I know now, we definitely would have went to a domestic violence program for counseling, for peer support, for transportation, for job help, for all sorts of things. They're not like 20, 30 years ago, a domestic violence shelter was considered like a bunker where you just went, you got a cot, kind of like a FEMA health emergency situation, right? Shelters are so much more comprehensive now. And I think everyone should know where their local program is, how to contact them, and connect the dots there.
Yeah, some of the shelters are even more like houses as well, right?
Yes, a lot of our programs are very large houses, so it's kind of a home-like experience. We have a couple that are more formal and that they're like I don't want to say a compound, but think of it almost like a hotel.
Okay.
You can kind of check in and have that experience, because the goal really is not to take control of a victim's narrative. When you go to shelter, that shelter is going to give that person all the resources they need to thrive. So they're really going to say, here's all the things we have. Take them, don't take them, but you're free to do as you choose, restoring control back to that victim.
Yeah. So what do you think would have happened or been the outcome for you and your siblings had you guys stayed, where y'all were?
That's a good question. There's a lot of what could have happened questions that kind of linger in my mind. I think we probably all would have dropped out of school. I would not have been in college. I never would have gotten my degrees. I would not be a homeowner. I would not be in a good relationship like I am now. I'm actually very grateful because my older sister actually did drop out of school. And she went back, got her GED, was able to have a great relationship, has an amazing son now. And I'm extremely proud of her and what she's done. And I think we all have to define success in our own way. And for a lot of people that didn't get out, they're still struggling. They are successful because they survived it. And I think that is what we should all be hopeful for, is that we can get out of it, have victory over violence and survive what happens to us.
Yeah. So what are some red flags? Like if you're in a relationship and you know you don't realize it, oftentimes I'm sure people in abusive relationships probably don't even realize that they're in them.
Definitely. We know that the numbers are out there. There's 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men are expected to have intimate partner violence occur in their lifetime. Some really common ones are the relationship moves super fast, super quickly. So if you meet someone and they want to propose within a month, or they're saying, I love you, I want to pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah.
It's definitely a warning sign. If they're constantly putting you down, verbal abuse is just as serious as physical abuse, and it's a really great manipulation tactic by abusers. Extreme jealousy. Jealousy is not romantic.
Yeah.
Oftentimes in the media, you see partners who are extremely possessive, and that's great for TV, but it's not reality. That's not what you want in a partner.
Yeah.
Isolation from friends and family is also another one. Making sure that they don't have access to the outside world. The first rule of domestic violence is you don't talk about it. You don't get to share that with other people. And that was definitely the case with my family. My abusive parent hated it whenever we would talk about what happened to us. And we were always terrified if a teacher started asking too many questions, or if someone at church wanted to know more about why we weren't there. So it's definitely a really easy tool for abusers to keep their victims isolated.
Yeah. So with your abuse in your family, was it verbal? Was it physical?
It was a combination of verbal, physical, financial, for sure.
Okay.
Thankfully, it happened before like the technology revolution of the past 20 years. And so I don't think my abusive parent would have been able to stalk us with that, but there was a lot of stalking as well. There was reproductive coercion and I believe sexual abuse, but it varies among all families. And I think it's important to talk about, especially stalking and the financial abuse, because those are a little bit more sinister and not reported nearly enough.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that? What exactly is, the financial abuse and the stalking aspect?
Yeah. So financial abuse, if you think about it, it's really easy for an abusive partner to maintain power and control over their victim. If that victim is not allowed to go to work, or if they have to turn their paycheck over, if they can't control any of their money, how are they supposed to leave, right? And an abuser can often portray it as a very loving gesture. Well, you don't know how to spend money. Maybe they have a lot of debt. Oh, you can't manage your finances. I'll just do it for you. And so you're able to take away a person's autonomy over time before they even realize it. And often there's very limited legal recourses for that. So if you share a joint bank account, maybe if you go divorce, maybe if you work with law enforcement, you can recover some of it. But once that money is gone, it's kind of like, well, what can you do? Hope they pay it back. There's limited funds with the Crime Victim Reparations Board, but even then I think there are, you have to qualify, and there's an application process for that. For stalking is hugely underreported. January is Stalking Awareness Month. The Stalking Prevention and Awareness Resource Center, or SPARC, has a ton of information and resources for victims if anyone wants to know more about that. But we do know that most victims of intimate partner violence were stalked in the last 12 months before they were murdered. And so we have to take it seriously. We have to report it. We have to document it. And we have to listen to people. If they say financial abuse is happening to them, or verbal abuse, if someone comes to you and says, this is what's happening, I want to share it with you, we have to believe them. It costs nothing to believe a victim.
That's true. And I know a lot of people, I guess they sometimes feel like, oh, no one's going to believe me, so why should I even speak up, right? So of course people need to not do that, because it is important to speak up. So as far as the financial abuse goes, let's say you do have like a joint bank account and all of your paychecks are going in there, and your abusive partner sees that. How can you start a plan to try to separate your money so maybe you can build up some money on the side to maybe make an escape?
I would say that a person should work with an advocate at shelter to work on that safety plan.
Okay.
And I only say that because every situation is different. I could probably give 10 different ways that you could try to take money and hide it. But I don't want to give any abuser who's watching this a reason to go and look for those hidden piles of cash, right? We kind of want to keep that available for victims.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's see. I guess just talk about some resources that are out there if people don't know about them.
Well, I will say that the coalition, so what we do at the coalition, we work with shelters, right? So if someone calls us, what we're going to do is we're going to refer you to one of those programs. We might refer you to another agency. We don't have any direct services for victims. So as much as it breaks our heart when victims call, we can't actually give you anything directly, but we have some great resources out there as far as our local programs. We have great partners such as the Center for Arkansas Legal Services, Arkansas Legal Aid, the Coalition Against Sexual Assault. There's a ton of places out there that do offer direct services or have more insight into, how to get additional services.
Okay.
And so I would just say, if someone wants to call and figure that out, we can help you, but we can't give you anything directly.
What's the number to call for you guys?
So our number is 501-907-5612.
Okay. So 501-907-5612. So people can contact you guys if they need any help. Anything else you want to add about the resources you guys have there as well?
Just check out our website. I think it's somewhere on the screen.
Yeah.
But we have all of our information is typically up on our website. We're a very transparent organization. We'll tell you what we can do, what we can't do. Our goal is really to raise awareness and stop domestic violence in Arkansas.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything else you want to add, or anything else that you know now, that maybe one piece of information you know now that you wish you would have known when you were younger?
I would say to be kind to yourself. There's so much more research now on trauma and the brain and what it does to people. And I sometimes still struggle with this. I want to kick myself. If I had just known, if I had just called this number or went to this place, then I could have stopped it. Yeah. But we have to recognize that the only person responsible for what happened to a victim of domestic violence is the perpetrator. We have to recognize that they're the ones to take the blame. They're the ones who did something illegal, and it's not our fault, right? And trauma to the brain can cause all sorts of problems with memory and mood swings and even chronic health conditions. So we have to recognize that our path to healing, it's a long one. It's not a quick solution, right? It's a day by day, year by year path.
What are some ways that you personally have worked through that trauma?
So definitely having a great support system. So not per se having someone to tell me what to do, but just having people around me that can listen to what happened to me and share their experiences and just be there as like a sounding board. Support groups are present at all of our domestic violence programs, or most of them are. Sometimes with COVID, they're in person or virtual, but they should be there. Yeah. Those have been incredibly helpful. Just hearing what happened to other people helps kind of spark memories and gets me different types of resources. I would also say there's a great program out there, Immerse. Had I known about them many years ago,
yeah, I've heard of them.
I definitely would have been a part of their program. They help kids age out of foster care between 18 and 24 who've been through crisis, and they're a great resource.
Speaking of that, so because you said you were 15 when you guys left, so how is that process? If you are, a minor. I know that's a whole nother layer, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was, like I said, very lucky that I had a family member, an aunt, who was willing to be our legal guardian, who was willing to put herself in court, answer questions, take responsibility for myself and my younger sister at the time. Had I not had her, I probably would have had to become an emancipated minor or just be a runaway to get out of our situation. Yeah, I was very fortunate and privileged that I wasn't placed in foster care, but I think a lot of kids are. And I think there's a lot of room to grow in foster care. I think there's a lot of room to grow for services with emancipated minors and legal resources. I'm not really qualified to speak on that. Yeah. I was just very fortunate. And I don't think there's anything more to say than just, had it gone differently, I don't think I would be here today.
Yeah, so many variables. And that the hotline is 24 hours, right? The domestic violence hotline?
Yes, it's 24/7, and they have, I think, 165 languages available. Oh, wow. That 799 safe. The website, if you just Google DV hotline, it'll have like a chat line that you can also chat if you don't want to call. I believe there is also a texting line that they just implemented this past year.
I think I saw that. It's like you text SMART, I believe, to some, oh, I don't know the numbers. I did see that earlier today, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff out there, and I would just encourage people to don't be silent. Don't let the abuser control the narrative. Speak up and speak out, especially if you see something happening. You are not alone, and there's a lot of places out there that will help you. It's just, taking that first step and acknowledging that maybe you do need some help.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, is there any final words you have for anybody out there who, may be watching this and finding themselves in a similar situation?
I would say you don't deserve what happens to you, and that you do deserve better. You deserve peace and a feeling of safety at home, and there's help available.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know that the time always flies by so fast, but thanks for joining us and just kind of sharing your story. And I hope that people at home watching, maybe got some good information and can also, become a survivor of this and no longer a victim of it. All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And like I said, please give our coalition a call, and we'll be happy to help point people in the right direction.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Brandy. All right. Well, that is all the time we have for today's episode of this digital series. If you guys have any questions, you can comment them on our Facebook pages. And after the show, I'll try to go on there and answer some of those questions for you guys. So thanks so much for joining us. And remember, there's victory with love. Take care.